There's never a dull moment when it comes to Minnesota sports. Whether it's positive or negative.
The Yankees have swept the Twins.
Minnesota Sports Chat has you covered. Talking nothing but Minnesota sports all year long. It's time now for the soon-to-be award-winning, if only in his own mind, Minnesota Sports Chat with your host, Ross Brendel.
After a brief, maybe fairly lengthy hiatus, welcome inside edition number 217 of the soon-to-be award-winning Minnesota Sports Chat, presented by my friends at Beans Coffee Company. Use the promo code SPORTSCHAT at coffeebybeans.com, and you'll save some cash on simply the best coffee you will ever put in your mouth, as I am doing right now on this morning of June 11th, as I record the latest edition of Minnesota Sports Chat with my guy, Mr. Gophers Guru himself. No better gentleman to join me on the hiatus return edition of Minnesota Sports Chat than the very smiling Daniel House. How you doing, buddy?
Welcome back.
You had me giggling on the X machine a few weeks ago. Well, maybe it was last week when Bill Walton passed away and you shared your story about bumping into Bill Walton. Why don't you start us off on this joyous edition of Minnesota Sports Chat with your bumping into Bill Walton story? I believe, was it at a Final Four or where was it?
Yeah, it was at the Final Four in Minneapolis. We're in the media concourse and I'm just walking. And all of a sudden, this guy just comes running up at me. Just a tall dude. And it just caught me by surprise right away. I'm like, oh my God, that's Bill Walton. And so he comes up and he goes, I love the red hair. And he's like talking about the history of redheads being unique and how we are special people and we are brotherhood. And he just spent a ton of time talking with me about the power of redheads. So that's my Bill Walton story.
I actually heard the 2024 election, they're thinking maybe decided by the redhead voting bloc. Can you confirm nor deny that voting bloc of people determining the election in 2024?
I don't know. Bill Walton would be the person to ask about that.
Yeah, rest in peace, Bill Walton. By all accounts, I never met the man, but by all accounts, a great man. Brought a lot of people a lot of joy doing college basketball and being involved with ESPN over the years, and a great basketball player, obviously, in his own right. Here's what we're going to do with Daniel House today. Daniel is Mr. Gophers Guru. Learn more about him. Please, if you're a Gopher fan, get a subscription to gophersguru.com. Just go there. You'll learn more about it. Sign up. If you're a Gophers fan, you will not be disappointed. We'll touch on that in the back half of the program. House, though, knows a lot about sports. Very well-rounded individual. Probably more well-rounded than myself. I'll give him that compliment. So we'll spend some time going all around the state of Minnesota and some of the teams here. First off, since I've recorded, there's been a lot of issues behind the scenes with PWHL Minnesota, but congratulations to them. Very cool to see another women's team in town get it done and win a championship. The Minnesota Lynx, I've caught a good chunk of their games to start the year. Daniel House, hashtag Lynx back. We might be back competing for championships, so I hope we are. Nafisa Collier and McBride, man, they're fun to watch when they get shooting. So I'm looking forward to that this summer. I think the Minnesota Lynx might be championship good, but that Las Vegas Aces team, to steal AJ Fredrickson term from Score North, they're a wagon, so they're going to be tough, but we'll see about our Minnesota Lynx. Let's start, though, Daniel House, with the Minnesota Vikings. We're through a lot of the off-season, I guess, workouts. We've had OTAs and mini camp, training camp. We're right around the corner. It would appear, barring a bunch of injuries and setbacks, the plan is for J.J. McCarthy, unless he completely wows in training camp, which at this point, I don't believe that will happen, but the plan is probably for J.J. McCarthy, and this is the Ross endorsed plan, to hopefully not play at all this season. And if he plays, it's in massive mop-up duty when the team is either getting pasted or pasting somebody else. Would you agree or disagree with that plan to basically have J.J. McCarthy probably start the year as the 3 and at best the number 2 quarterback on the Minnesota Vikings roster.
We'll see how the first few games go. First 7 weeks, I feel will tell us whether J.J. McCarthy gets in the game or not based on how Sam Darnold performs. And even then, I'm not sure. J.J. McCarthy's 22 years old. There's no sense in rushing this thing. He has a lot of the traits and familiarity with what the Vikings are doing. We've talked a lot about that on this pod, that I thought JJ was a good fit to transition into the Vikings offense. But, I actually know the offensive system is very complex that Kevin O'Connell has. There's a lot of terminology, the language. You should see the playbook for the Vikings, how detailed it is and how much mental processing goes into it. So there's a learning curve to just get mentally ready to go. There are concepts that, probably he'll learn and used at Michigan that have a little bit of a different language, but it will take time. So why rush that process? You'll know when he's ready. They'll have a good measure on it. I think bringing in Josh McCown was a great move because he worked with Bryce Young last year and learned a lot of the things that maybe didn't go well, the things that did go well when they were trying to get Bryce Young ready to play. And he understands that, like, if the guy maybe isn't quite ready to play, you have an alternative option. Go in that direction. And Darnold, you look at the supporting cast that Darnold had at previous stops, like the New York Jets supporting cast he had might be one of the worst quarterbacks had in recent memory in the modern era here. So what does he do after a year with Kyle Shanahan, learning and developing, growing there, and then coming to Kevin's offense? There's talent there, and I want to see training camp. It'll be fascinating to watch how all the pieces come together because of all the work they did this offseason, retooling in many ways.
I'm excited about this Minnesota Vikings season, and I'll remain excited even if they go 5-12. They could go 10-7, but I think a lot of what we'll see this year is setting the building blocks in place for years to come. And I expect to be pleasantly surprised by Sam Darnold for every reason that you just said. The supporting cast with the Jets was awful. Bad place to put a young kid in. The supporting cast with the Carolina Panthers, not much better. The most talent he's ever had around him was last year with San Francisco, and he was only the backup. And he did play in one game, and he played pretty well. You do hope that everything he took in from there, like you said with Kyle Shanahan, translates to a good season here in Minnesota, so eventually he can get paid one more time and get a nice contract from another team. Because as I talked about on Purple Access with Tyler Fornes and Judd Zolgad, I think last week, part of Purple Daily and the podcast network there, the only way Sam Darnold's back in 2025 is a Super Bowl appearance and more likely a Super Bowl win. And I think we can all be objective enough to say that that's probably not going to happen unless there's an injury or something to J.J. McCarthy. But let's not even put that out into the universe. One question I do want to ask you, and it's not going to affect the team winning and losing in 2024, but if J.J. McCarthy is good in training camp and he plays well in the preseason games, which don't matter nearly as much as people think they do, but he looks good in the exhibitions or the scrimmages, he can maybe elevate himself to number 2. And is it possible the Vikings then keep Jaren Hall at 3 and look to trade Nick Mullins for whatever they can get because they are short on draft capital? I feel like that's an avenue, right?
It's possible. And Kevin and Kwesi brought in Jaren Hall as someone that they thought they could develop into a solid backup. So last year he was not ready to play. And I mean, that was a very tall task to ask him to come in and actually start NFL games in a rookie season where we knew that he needed time. I mean, anybody who watched the film at BYU and evaluated that knew that Jaren Hall needed some seasoning and he had to come in and really play right away. So I don't think they'd cut bait that fast, but I do know that that quarterback room, it's competitive. That's a good thing, though, because it will help all of them get better, and then they can figure out the best plan moving forward into the season.
We've had some time to, I think, sit back, evaluate, decompress, and just kind of look back on the Minnesota Timberwolves season as a whole Overall, Daniel House, I'm pretty darn positive. I know I'd been tooting my own horn for a while, saying about a year and a half ago, I said the Minnesota Timberwolves would go to the finals this year. And I remain bullish on that, even into Dallas. And I'll be honest, I thought the Wolves would beat Dallas in 5 or 6 games. I think when you go back and look at that series, the Minnesota Timberwolves easily could have beaten Dallas in 5 or 6 games. But you hope lessons learned from this year's Western Conference Finals applies to years going forward. I have my doubts that they can be back in the conference finals next year, just based on Ant playing all year long, now immediately jumping into Team USA play. Rudy, a lot older, a lot more tread on the tires, also going to play all year long. But also maybe the Mavs showed this year, as long as you're maybe in that top 6 and not playing in the play-in, maybe you just truly now more so than ever in the NBA just need to get into the dance and you can go on a run. Overall, I'm disappointed they didn't beat the Dallas Mavericks. House. I strongly believe we're through 2 games of the NBA Finals now at record date. Boston up 2-0. I honestly thought the winner of the West, for lack of a better term, was going to be the sacrificial lamb to Boston, that Boston would win the NBA Finals in 5 games, maybe 6, best case scenario. I believe that that's going to happen. They're well on their way. But I would have loved to have been that sacrificial lamb. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity. But overall, I think from a fan standpoint, for a franchise and a fan base that is just starved for anything positive, you can't look at this year and say it's a failure just because they had what I would say is a letdown in the conference finals. I just don't think you can look at it that way. Now, if there's another letdown next year in the playoffs, losing to a team that you think they should beat, okay, well, then maybe I'd be a bit more disappointed. But for this year, I think we just have to enjoy it and love seeing the ascension of Ant and hope that that's only going to continue over the next couple of seasons, because House, it's going to have to, because Rudy Gobert at some point is going to start to become a less effective player. Karl Anthony Towns might not be a part of the Timberwolves going forward. If he is, it's probably only for another year or 2. So at some point, Ant is going to continue to have to get better and be better than he is now if we want this team to appear in an NBA Finals and maybe even win one down the road.
Successful season. I look at how that thing ended. It exploited the area that the Timberwolves need to address, and that is another shot creator. Need somebody who can attack off the dribble and create their own shot, hit the three-pointer. I felt coming into the playoffs, that was one of my concerns, is maybe they were one dynamic shooter short. And the ability to have somebody that can shoot like that will improve your court spacing and open up attack lanes where Ant, there was times where the gaps got really compressed because the Wolves just didn't have that other complementary, shot creator that can, basically be the 2 to Ant. And, the style at which their roster is built, I think Jaden McDaniels is going to be somebody that ascends even more moving forward. And you'd like to see him become a little bit more of a consistent shot creator. But I believe that's the thing that you watch the Celtics and the Mavs now. The Celtics have shot creators. They have a lot of different weapons that can get you offensively, where the Wolves just have to figure that end of the court out. And maybe that's by signing a dynamic player. Maybe that's trading for a dynamic shot creator. We'll see. But I'm just glad they got Tim Conley locked up. That was a very concerning deal if he would have left.
Yeah, and I think it's twofold, House. I would agree on shot creator. I think they'll have to get creative. And again, I'm not asking that they trade Karl Anthony Towns. I think it's a possibility. I think one thing that they're going to need to, and maybe it is just in the form of that shot creator that you talked about, but just another guy who's going to make you pay when he's open in the corner. That was one thing that the Wolves did well the first couple rounds of the playoffs, but were maybe definitely shooting better than they had in the regular season, and it came back to haunt them a little bit in the regular season or in the postseason late. When you get open looks, especially in the corner, you have to hit those. Nah struggled. I'm not going to put it on Naz Reid, but he started to struggle. To your point, Jaden McDaniels, aside from the one game where he went off, was struggling. Just another guy who can when he's open, when Ant is being double teamed, when Carl's being double teamed, or Rudy's down low and can't get a shot off, somebody you can kick it to and can drain that 18-footer, just no questions asked, because he's wide open. I think that's going to be big. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're picking at 27 in the NBA draft. Who knows what they'll do with that? Maybe they package that with a player to try and get one of those supporting players that we talked about, House. Maybe they find a diamond in the rough there. It can be done. We've seen it a lot more in recent memory. Heck, the Mavs had a couple of guys who were drafted in the mid to late first round who are contributing. So it can be done. It will be interesting to see what the Minnesota Timberwolves do with pick number 27 in the upcoming NBA draft. I'm starting to giggle with this transition because I know your thoughts. We spent time on it last year. We're going to talk a little Minnesota Twins, Daniel House, as we record today. They are a playoff team. They are a wild card team. They have the 2 games up. I think it's still early, but I think you can start kind of looking at where the league is and where playoff positioning is. At some point, the Royals and the Guardians are going to come back a bit. I don't know how far back they're going to come at this point. We're in mid-June, and they've been playing good baseball all year. I feel like this Minnesota Twins team, Daniel House, this is literally an exact replica of what we saw last year. Last year, I felt like they were just limping through the season. I don't think they're limping through the season this year. I think there's been reasons why they've been very inconsistent. Injuries have played a part of that, with Buxton still trying to find himself. He spent some time on the IL. Carlos Correa has been on the IL. By the way, his defense is fantastic. That alone is worth seeing. Royce Lewis, basically just like last year, didn't play at all, then came back in early June. But it's the inconsistency at the plate that is leading to, we win 7 games in a row. We lose 5 in a row. We win 13 in a row. We lose 14 of 20 games. And that is something that at some point this year, Daniel House, if they want to be taken seriously, that's going to have to be figured out. Last year, they got better in August and September and into the playoffs. They were not striking out nearly at the rate they were the first 4 seasons. There are still too many games, though, Daniel House, that I watch, and I can now watch again because I changed providers just so I can watch stupid Twins baseball. The at-bats to me at times are just maddening. And that is something, they're not going to fix it because they would have fixed it by now. So I'm struggling with learning to accept it or just sitting back and saying, guys, we need to entirely change this philosophy. And they're obviously not going to listen to some guy with a podcast, but it's a frustrating team because I look at them today, Daniel. They're sitting, again, record date 35-31. They're technically in the playoffs. Thank goodness for wild card expansion. But they should be better than that. And I truly do believe that. I don't know if they're a World Series team. Actually, I take that back. I don't think they're a World Series team, but they are much better than 35-31. And I guess to me, that's the frustration because I think they should be better. But at the same time, I'm telling you, even though I think they should be better, I don't think they can win a World Series. And then I get frustrated just thinking about that. Why am I wasting my time watching 150 plus Twins games a year? Lot to unpack there. Any thoughts on the Minnesota Twins? Because I know you have been on record basically saying it's I don't want to put words in your mouth, but basically it's an unwatchable brand of baseball, which definitely last year, the first 4 months, it was a crime against baseball that they were out there every day for 4 months.
Yeah, you mentioned the plate discipline. That is always something that drives me insane. But the starting pitching has been pretty poor. You look at the ERA of the starters, third worst in the American League. I just think that you got to have that good pitching. And you look at the decision that they made, payroll wise this year, and that's a decision you got to make as owners. But you have to be able to invest your funds in pitching because I always compare it to like offensive linemen in football, that like good offensive linemen never hit free agency. You have to be able to build pitching up. You got to pay a premium for it because that's the way that you win baseball games, especially as the season progresses. You got to have a dynamic starting group that can go 6-7 innings and then the bullpen be able to close the thing out every single night. And so I I think there's just a host of problems with the Twins, and a lot of it is, like you said, can't keep guys healthy. Like, at what point is there something fundamentally going on here? Why all these guys continue to get hurt? I mean, I don't know. Is it just the snake bit nature of these players, or like, what is there something you're doing? Like, what is it?
Well, remember 2 years ago, and I still giggle thinking about this. Remember 2 years ago, before they made the playoffs last year, they had a very disappointing year. I think we all thought they should have made the playoffs. They didn't. Thought maybe there'd be changes on Rocco's staff, and all they did was fire the head athletic trainer. And now for the next year and a half, they still have injuries to all their star players. And that to me is, I don't know if you can 100% put it on the training and what you're doing behind the scenes. It's probably a combo platter of both. But it's also really funny that as the team underperforms, you identify, well, I think we're going to make a change at trainer. We think that's one of the reasons. And nothing's changed. They still have injuries left and right
I don't know.
in the organization.
And you know what, Ross?
And these guys aren't trying to get injured, too. That's the other part. Royce Lewis and Byron Buxton want to play.
The baseball's changed so much. I was talking with somebody about this the other day. Like, over the last 10 years, baseball's one of those sports where it's just lost the luster that it has. It's not the same where you turn on the game and you're like, all the players, they're stars, like the whole brand of baseball. I mean, this is a whole separate podcast of how baseball has regressed from an interest standpoint. I think there are a lot of reasons why, but that's my whole point. It's just baseball's not the same thing it was 10 years ago.
And every team now is using 10 starting pitchers a year because heaven forbid we ask a starting pitcher to pitch past the sixth inning at best. I mean, now when you see a starter go out there to start the seventh inning, you think you found a game from 1997, right? You're like, what am I watching here? I know what I'm drinking, and I'm drinking Beans Coffee Company, who's been powering this podcast, Minnesota Sports Chat, for over 2 years now. Thank you, boys, for doing that. I'm on that Profectus blend again. Beans Coffee Company, they have a roast that will satisfy all coffee drinkers. They truly do. Whether it's a delightful light roast, heck, it might even be one of those bold dark roast options that cleanses your palate. You'll find it at coffeebybeans.com. We all know that cup of coffee, especially in the morning, it's so important. Drink the best coffee around. Drink Beans Coffee. You'll be supporting a hardworking crew in Minnesota. Hey, they're fans just like we are of the exact same teams. Again, today's cup, Profectus Blend, a 100% Colombian light roast. Love my Colombian roast. So good. Beans Coffee Company ships anywhere in the U.S. with free shipping on all orders over $35. Use the promo code SportsChat. Again, that is SportsChat at checkout, and you will save bigly at coffeebybeans.com. That is coffeebybeans.com.
Don't worry, Daniel. I'm keeping the under.
I double tap that. Let's do that one more time.
Don't worry, Daniel. I'm keeping the under.
Let's talk Gopher sports. Whatever's in your notebook, Gopher football literally right around the corner. They'll start practicing again here a handful of weeks, about a month and a half. North Carolina championship season week looms. Ben's roster, meet the new roster, a lot different from the old roster. Welcome to college basketball and college athletics in 2024. And anything else you might have. I was just at gophersguru.com, Daniel. I saw on the day of June 9th, you were very busy. There was a lot of recruiting news, which I knew about, and you went in depth on basically everybody the Gopher football program signed. So that was kind of fun to pick around those stories.
Oh, yeah. Busy weekend. Have more recruits on campus this coming weekend as well. Able to close the deal. I'd say the big prize of the visitors that came to campus this past weekend is Nelson McGuire from Texas. And he's a player they found at TCU's satellite camp. Played the defensive line as a sophomore, now converting over to the offensive side. Played a little tackle in the spring, got to see some film of that. And the traits that you're looking for, length, versatility, the movement skills, all the things that you want in an offensive lineman. He has a versatility to play all over the place, inside or out on the edge. And he's just raw from a fundamental standpoint just because he hasn't played the position as much. But you see that natural ability, and Minnesota's going to try to unlock that. I see him having one of the higher ceilings potentially when the dust clears of this group of players. And that just speaks to the value of going to satellite camps and looking for players, because you can occasionally find a diamond in the rough. And he had a couple of visits set up down in with the Texas schools, Texas Tech and Houston, ended up canceling those and committing to Minnesota. So he's someone that definitely helps. You look at this class, the big emphasis has been O-line and D-line. And that's something that I think is so important when you're building your program, especially for your recruiting. You want to be able to inject in those areas to develop there, and then, sparse in potential players from the transfer portal to fill in the gaps as needed. So I look at that group, and I feel like they did a nice job. Zach Stokowski from Portland, Oregon, athletic player, can move really well, checks the boxes of what Callie looks for in developmental tackles. Actually went to the same high school as Blake Brendel, the Vikings offensive lineman. So going out to Portland, Oregon, finding someone who's very athletic, has the frame, just needs to, get stronger and develop, which can be said for pretty much all offensive linemen that are coming into the college level. But I liked what they did with the offensive line specifically. And then I was at a camp last week, got to see Grant Washington from Cleveland, a running back. He came, did a workout there at the camp, impressed the coaches. He's a smaller, shifty back, very, very explosive in the second and third levels, able to finish runs. That's something that they really like, that one cut type of runner. So they found him at a camp, came in, performed well, was committed to Central Michigan, Minnesota offered, and he flipped. So keep an eye on that position. I think they'll add another running back. Still a work in progress at linebacker. We'll see what happens there. But that's kind of an update on 25 recruiting, and then there'll be some more action this weekend as well.
A little bit on 2024, specifically with the transfer portal. A lot was made about how well the Gophers did in the 2024 transfer portal. How do you gauge that? And can you... I don't know. I feel like that's even tougher than the high school recruiting to a degree, because across the board, I'm not specifically talking about just the Gopher football team, but a lot of these players in the transfer portal got to colleges and didn't really play. So it's really tough for me to say, boy, I'm glad that they're here, because we still don't know how good they are. But what do you make of how well the Gophers are perceived to have done in the transfer portal windows? Because there are two of them.
Yeah, I mean, you ideally want to be adding a lot of talent in that first window. You want to be finding productive players. I have a whole, philosophy on how to handle the transfer portal. I think Minnesota, you look at this second window, there's a lot of players that they're adding for the future. They have multiple years of eligibility available. You look at Tyler Williams, a big, long wide receiver with good movement skills, developmental player that has multiple years of control. Jackson Howard, you look at a local product, someone that they recruited the first time, circle back, when he hits the portal, able to get him, could potentially have a smaller rotational role, but another guy for the future. You look at the whole transfer list, Adam Kasai, pass rusher from Clemson, has the long frame, just has to get stronger. So again, another player with multiple years of eligibility. Really, the only player that has limited eligibility is Jaron Mangum, the running back from Michigan State. And that's something that they really emphasize in this portal class. You go with Mangum from Michigan State, C.A. Bangura, Marcus Major, and you're bringing in running backs to try to build some depth in that room. I mean, I went back and looked. There wasn't many teams in the FBS that took 3 or more running backs. That's something I'll probably touch on in an article coming up here. But Ross, this collectively, the second transfer portal window, I feel like there's more of guys that are potentially going to help them down the road, that maybe they can come in and play rotational roles, but we'll see.
What can you tell us about Ben's boys in the basketball program? It's not Ben Johnson's fault. I guess you could say, well, he is still the face of the program. So it's going to be put on him. But when I hear things from people who know a lot more than I do, that Pharrell Payne next year is going to make more money than what the entire Gopher basketball roster is being paid next year, that's a problem. And I don't know. Doesn't mean you can't win. And I guess that's what I'm going to ask you. With those limitations and budgetary constraints when it comes to NIL and paying players that appears to be placed on the University of Minnesota men's basketball team, can this team build off of the success of last year, even though a lot of the parts are going to be different?
I actually really like what they did in the transfer portal. I think you added some versatility, especially with the bigs, being able to play a couple different roles. Ben Johnson ultimately, I think, wants to become more of a positionless roster build. He wants to have guys that can not necessarily have to be pigeonholed into a specific role. They can do multiple things. I mean, you look at like Femi Adekale, Brennan Rigsby, Frank Mitchell, all those guys, they can do different things for you, help you out in various ways. I think Rigsby is going to be someone I'm intrigued by, especially his versatility, ability to attack off the dribble, be a ball handler, also play off ball. I thought that was a pretty good move to bring him in as a complementary piece. And then Patterson, obviously someone who's going to be relied heavily upon to handle the basketball. Him and Mike Mitchell will probably share duties, but that's a good thing. Like, they have multiple ball handlers. They've got Patterson, they've got Mitchell, they've got Rigsby who can handle the ball a little bit. All those guys should be able to help the backcourt significantly. And then being able to get Dawson Garcia back. I mean, I think that's the storyline of the offseason. That guy, people talk about Pharrell Payne's money, but let me tell you, Dawson Garcia had opportunities to go elsewhere too, and he stayed here. And, that just is something that I think sets the tone. Him coming back, Parker Fox returning, playing another year. Those two guys are going to be the big leaders along with Mike Mitchell setting the tone. So I'm excited to get a closer look at the team. Probably maybe get a practice, I would think, available soon to go look at the guys that they added. It'll be interesting because there's a lot of turnover. That's just the way it is these days. And now with the salary cap, we didn't even talk about the salary cap.
I know.
That is going to be something fascinating moving forward here.
We'll save that for probably maybe a preseason Gopher football, Gopher basketball teardown at some point in August. Final one for you. Birmingham Stallions and San Antonio Brahmas in the UFL Championship. Ooh. Who do you got? Who are you cheering for? I'm a little disappointed in our Battlehawks. They had a chance to be the first ever UFL team to host the UFL Championship game in their own stadium. They fall in the XFL Conference Championship to the Brahmas. 62-year-old A.J. McCarron not able to get it done for his squad. So we got the Brahmas and the Stallions, 5 o'clock, Sunday, June 16th on Fox in the first ever UFL Championship game. And House, I will admit to you, I have watched a bit of the league. It's been better than I thought it would be. I still enjoy the CFL a bit more, but it's been better. It's been better. But who do you got?
Taking the Birmingham Stallions. I've watched a lot of their games. I love the schemes they run, their coaching. Skip Holtz is a great coach. I think he helped Northwestern a lot last year. And I'm not sure if he's going to stay on in that role or not, but that's something underrated to watch. Everyone's going, okay, like, why did Northwestern play so much better last year? What was the deal? Like, they had all that stuff happen right before the season, and then David Braun gets put in the role. Like, David Braun is a good coach, but like Skip Holtz being on that staff had to help. And so I am taking a lot of weight in what he can do as a coach. I really like that guy. I think he runs a good show.
Top memory of 2023, Daniel, for all the wrong reasons, watching 27 people storm the field at Ryan Field when Northwestern completed their comeback over the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. Daniel, you're the best. I encourage everybody to find you on the X Machine, which I think is at Daniel House MN. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. Daniel House MN.
And GophersGuru.com. Thank you as always for the time, buddy. Much appreciated.
Appreciate it. Good to be back.
That's Mr. Daniel House. I am Ross Brendel at the Ross Brendel on the X machine. Don't forget, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please rate and review this podcast. You can find it on YouTube now. Smash the subscribe and like button, as all the cool kids like to say, and word of mouth really does help. Tell your friends and family all about this podcast. However you're watching or listening, maybe send the link to a friend. I would greatly appreciate that. Hopefully we'll be back in a nice groove of a pod or two every week for the foreseeable future. I'm Ross Brendel. That was Daniel House. We both thank you so much for supporting this podcast at Also Beans Coffee Company. I'll talk again with you real soon in this very feed.
Thanks for listening to Minnesota Sports Chat, presented by Beans Coffee Company. Use the promo code SPORTSCHAT. That's one word, Sports Chat, to save at checkout. Follow Ross on X at the Ross Brendel. Like and subscribe to Minnesota Sports Chat wherever you get your podcasts. Rate and review kindly.